My grandson warned me about my son and his wife, but nothing prepared me for what I saw next. Before we continue, please drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button. Now, let me back up and explain how we got to this delicious moment of karma. My name is Rose, and if you're listening to this, I need you to understand one thing about me right from the start. I am not a helpless woman. I'm 68 years old. I have buried a husband. I have raised a son, and I have paid off every single cent of the mortgage on this house. This house in Woodland Hills isn't just a pile of bricks and wood to me. It is my trophy. My husband, heavy rest his soul, and I bought it 40 years ago. We scraped together pennies, we skipped vacations, and we ate leftovers more nights than I care to admit, just so we could own a piece of the world that was truly ours. When I stand in my kitchen, looking out at the azaleas I planted with my own hands 3 decades ago, I don't just see flowers. I see my independence. I see the place where I am supposed to grow old in peace, surrounded by my things, my memories, and my safety. I really thought that was how the rest of my life would go. Just quiet mornings with my coffee and the occasional chaotic, wonderful weekend with my grandson, Cody. That Saturday started like any other. The California sun was already warm, and I had the windows cracked open to let the breeze through. I was humming to myself, straightening up the guest room because my son, Jeffrey, and his wife, Angie, were dropping Cody off for the weekend. They called it a marriage retreat. They said they needed a few days to reconnect, just the two of them up in Santa Barbara. I wanted to believe them. As a mother, you always want to believe your children are doing well, that their marriages are strong, that they are happy. But when their SUV pulled into my driveway at 10 o'clock sharp, I felt a little prickle of unease at the back of my neck. You know that feeling, don't you? That intuition that tells you the weather is about to turn, even when the sky is blue. I walked out to the porch to greet them. Jeffrey climbed out of the driver's seat, and the first thing I noticed was how tired he looked. He's a handsome man, my Jeffrey. He has his father's strong jaw and my dark eyes, but that morning he looked gray. His shirt was wrinkled, which wasn't like him, and he was sweating even though it wasn't hot yet. Angie didn't even get out of the car right away. She sat in the passenger seat, furiously typing on her phone, her brow furrowed. When she finally opened the door, she forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. It was tight, like a rubber band ready to snap. "Hi, Mom," Jeffrey said, walking up the path. He didn't hug me. He just sort of patted my shoulder, his eyes darting past me, looking into the hallway of the house. "Thanks for taking Cody on such short notice." "It's never short notice for my grandson," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "You know, I love having him." "Is everything all right? You two look a little worn out." "We're fine," Jeffrey said too quickly. "Just work stress. That's why we need this trip. Just to unplug, you know?" Angie came up behind him, carrying Cody's overnight bag. She dropped it on the porch with a heavy thud. "We really appreciate it, Rose," she said. Her voice was thin, brittle. She wouldn't look me in the eye. She kept glancing at Jeffrey, like they were sharing a secret conversation I wasn't part of. Then the back door opened, and my little Cody climbed out. Usually, that boy comes at me like a cannonball full of noise and energy. But today, he moved slowly. He was clutching his favorite stuffed bear, the one with the missing ear, and he looked small. So incredibly small. "Hey there, Bug," I said, opening my arms. Cody walked into my hug, but he didn't squeeze back. He just stood there, his little body stiff against my legs. I looked up at Jeffrey, concerned. "Is he feeling okay?" "He seems quiet." "He's fine," Jeffrey said, checking his watch. "Just tired. He was up late playing video games." Jeffrey walked past me, stepping into the foyer. "I'm just going to put his bag in his room." I stayed on the porch with Angie and Cody, but I watched my son. He didn't go to the guest room. He stopped at the keypad for my home security system on the wall. I saw him stare at it for a long moment. Then he turned back to me, shouting through the doorway. "Mom, you haven't changed the alarm code, have you?" I blinked, confused. "No, Jeffrey. It's the same as it's been for 10 years. Your birthday." "Why?" "Just checking," he said. He punched the numbers in, armed it, and then disarmed it immediately. Beep, beep, beep. "Just wanted to make sure it's working. For your safety. You're here all alone. You know, can't be too careful." Something about the way he said it made my stomach drop. "You're here all alone." It didn't sound like concern. It sounded like an observation, a calculation. He came back out, wiping his hands on his pants. "All right, we gotta run. Traffic is going to be a nightmare." He kissed the top of Cody's head, but he didn't look at his son. "Be good for Grandma, okay? Don't cause any trouble." "Bye, Rose," Angie said. She was already walking back to the car. "We'll be back Sunday night." I watched them get into the car. They didn't look at each other. They didn't turn on the radio. Jeffrey put the car in reverse and backed out of the driveway a little too fast. I stood there waving until they turned the corner and disappeared from sight. The silence that fell over the house was heavy. I looked down at Cody. He was still holding my hand, his grip surprisingly strong for a 6-year-old. His knuckles were white. "Well," I said, trying to shake off the strange mood my son had left behind. "How about some hot cocoa? I bought those little marshmallows you like." Cody didn't answer. He didn't move. He was staring at the spot where his parents' car had been. "Cody!" I squeezed his hand gently. "Honey, what's wrong? You're trembling." He looked up at me then, and my heart broke. His big brown eyes were filled with absolute terror. Tears were welling up in the corners, threatening to spill over. He looked like he was holding back a scream. He tugged on my hand, pulling me down. "Grandma," he whispered. I knelt down on the porch, ignoring the ache in my knees, so I could look him in the face. "What is it? Did Mommy and Daddy have a fight?" He shook his head frantically. He leaned in close, his breath warm against my ear, and whispered the words that would change my life forever. "Grandma, please don't sleep tonight." I pulled back, confused, trying to smile. "What? Why not? Are we going to have a slumber party?" He didn't smile. He grabbed my face with his small hands, forcing me to look at him. "No, Grandma, listen. This morning, I heard Dad talking to Mom. He thought I was asleep." "What did he say, Cody?" Cody's voice dropped so low I could barely hear him over the sound of the wind in the trees. He said that after tonight, you won't be living here anymore. He said the house will be ours. The world seemed to stop spinning. The birds stopped singing. The wind died down. All I could hear was the rushing of blood in my own ears. "Oh, honey," I stammered, my mind racing to find a logical explanation. A child's imagination is a wild thing. Maybe they were talking about moving in with me. Maybe they were talking about a nursing home in 10 years. "You must have misunderstood. Daddy would never." He said you wouldn't be around to stop them. Cody insisted, a tear finally rolling down his cheek. He said you were going to go away, and you wouldn't remember anything. I stood up, my legs feeling like jelly. I ushered Cody inside and locked the front door. "It's okay," I told him, though my voice was shaking. "It's just a story. Daddy loves us." I went to the kitchen to get him some water, my hands trembling as I held the glass. I needed to calm down. I needed to think. Jeffrey was my son. He was stressed, yes, and maybe money was tight, but he wasn't a monster. He wouldn't hurt me. I walked past the hallway mirror and stopped. By the front door, we have a little row of hooks for keys. I keep my car keys there, and a spare key to the front door. It's been hanging on that third hook for 5 years gathering dust. I keep it there in case I lock myself out while gardening. I looked at the hooks. My car keys were there, but the third hook was empty. The dust where the key used to be was disturbed, a clean, dark outline in the shape of the key left behind on the wood. Jeffrey hadn't just checked the alarm code. He had taken the spare key. I looked down the hall at my grandson, sitting on the sofa, clutching his bear, and watching the window. He wasn't imagining things. My son, my own flesh and blood, had taken the key to my house, verified my security code, and left me with a warning that I wouldn't be living here tomorrow. Cody was right. I couldn't sleep tonight, because whatever was coming through that door, it wasn't going to knock. I stood in the hallway, staring at that empty key hook for a long time. My heart was pounding against my ribs, not like a drum, but like a trapped bird. Panic is a funny thing. It makes some people freeze, and it makes others run. But me, I'm a problem solver. When my husband died, I didn't curl up in a ball. I learned how to fix the plumbing, and I learned how to balance the investment portfolio. I wasn't about to start freezing now. I looked at Cody. He was back on the sofa, clutching that ragged teddy bear, his eyes glued to the window, watching for the boogeyman. I needed to know what the boogeyman looked like before I could fight him. Then I remembered. Jeffrey had gone into the guest room to put Cody's bag down. He was in there for quite a while, and when he arrived, he was carrying that battered leather briefcase he takes everywhere. He says he never goes anywhere without his work, but he didn't bring it back out with him when he left. "Cody, honey," I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. "I'm going to go check on the guest room for a second. You stay right here, okay? The doors are locked. We are safe." He nodded, not taking his eyes off the driveway. I walked down the hallway to the guest bedroom. It's a sunny room, painted a soft yellow, usually reserved for when my sister visits from Florida. There, sitting on the end of the bed, was the briefcase. Now, I raised my son to respect privacy. I never read his diary when he was a boy. I never listened in on his phone calls. But that empty key hook had voided all the rules. I walked over and clicked the latches. They popped open with a loud snap that made me jump. I expected to see work papers, maybe blueprints, he's an architect, or contracts. Instead, I saw red ink. The first thing on top was a stack of letters banded together. I picked them up. Final notice. Past due. Collection agency. I flipped through them, my hands shaking. Credit cards maxed out. A second mortgage on his own house that I didn't know about. A business loan that had defaulted. I did the math in my head quickly. My son was over $200,000 in debt. I felt a wave of nausea. How had he hidden this? We talk every week. He drives a brand new car. He wears Italian suits. It was all a facade. A house of cards waiting for a stiff breeze. But debt is just money. You can fix money. You can sell a car. You can downsize. What I found underneath the financial ruin was something you can't fix. It was a glossy brochure. The paper was cheap. The colors faded. Shady Pines Assisted Living. I knew the place. It's 3 towns over. It's the kind of place you hear horror stories about on the news. The kind of place where the staff is overworked and underpaid, where the hallways smell like bleach and boiled cabbage, and where people go to be forgotten. Why would he have this? I'm 68. I still drive. I garden. I do the Sunday crossword in pen. I manage my own stocks. I don't need assisted living. I dug deeper into the briefcase and found a thick manila envelope. Inside was a legal document. My breath caught in my throat as I read the title, Petition for Emergency Guardianship. I sat down on the edge of the bed, the papers crinkling in my grip. I forced myself to read the legal jargon. It was an application to the court to have me declared mentally incompetent. There, in black and white, were lies about me. It said I had advanced dementia It claimed I was a danger to myself and others. It said I had been leaving the stove on, wandering the streets at night, forgetting who people were. Lies. All of it. Then I saw the date on the hearing request. Monday morning. The plan clicked together in my mind, terrifying and brilliant. They didn't want to kill me. That's too messy. That gets you life in prison. No, they wanted to erase me. If they could get a doctor or a social worker to come here tonight, maybe someone they paid off, maybe just someone they tricked, and testify that I was agitated, confused, or acting out, they could have me committed on a 72-hour hold. By the time I got out, Jeffrey would have emergency power of attorney. He would have control of my bank accounts. He would have the deed to this house. He would sell my home to pay his gambling debts, and he would leave me to rot in Shady Pines. I looked around the guest room. The sunlight hitting the yellow walls suddenly felt cold. My son didn't see a mother anymore. He saw a solution to his problems. The rage that filled me then was hotter than any fear I had ever felt. I worked 40 years for this life. I wiped his nose. I paid for his college. I sat up with him when he had the chicken pox. And this was his repayment. My phone rang in my pocket, shattering the silence. I nearly dropped the papers. I pulled it out. The screen said Jeffrey. I took a deep breath. I couldn't let him know I knew. Not yet. If he knew I found the papers, he might do something desperate. He might come back right now. I swiped answer and put the phone to my ear. Hello, I said. My voice sounded surprisingly normal. Hey, Mom, Jeffrey said. His voice was smooth like warm honey. Just checking in. We just got to the hotel. The traffic wasn't too bad. That's good, I said, staring at the lie about my dementia on the paper in my lap. Cody is fine. We were just about to read a book. Great, great, he said. There was a pause. A hesitation. Hey, look, I know I was a little weird about the alarm earlier. I just worry about you, alone in that big house. I'm fine, Jeffrey, I said. I've lived here a long time. I know, he said. But, people get older. Things change. Anyway, I just wanted to say, make sure you get a good, deep sleep tonight, Mom. Don't stay up worrying about anything. Just rest. The way he said it sent a chill down my spine. Deep sleep. Like he was hoping I wouldn't wake up. Or that when I did wake up, I wouldn't be in my own bed anymore. I lied. I'm very tired. I think I'll turn in early. Good, he said. That's good. Sleep tight. We'll see you soon. He hung up. I lowered the phone. My hand was shaking again, but this time it wasn't from fear. It was from adrenaline. He told me to sleep. He wanted me unconscious. He wanted me vulnerable so that when his help arrived, I would look confused and disoriented. I stood up and shoved the papers back into his briefcase. I snapped the latches shut. No, Jeffrey, I whispered to the empty room. I don't think I'll be doing much sleeping tonight. I walked back out to the living room. Cody looked up at me, his eyes wide. Grandma, he asked, are you okay? I walked over to the front door and checked the deadbolt again. Then I turned to my grandson. I'm fine, sweetie, I said, and for the first time that day, I genuinely smiled. It was a grim smile, a warrior's smile. But we have some work to do. Nobody is coming into this house unless we invite them. My son thought I was a senile old woman who could be pushed aside. He was about to find out that he had made a very, very big mistake. 2 a.m. is a lonely time. It's the hour when the world is supposed to be asleep, when the only sound you should hear is the refrigerator humming or the house settling. But that night, the silence in my living room felt heavy, like the air before a thunderstorm. I hadn't slept a wink. How could I? I was sitting in my armchair, the one my husband used to read his newspapers in, facing the front door. The lights were off. The only illumination came from the street lamp outside, casting long, distorted shadows across the rug. Cody was curled up on the sofa under my favorite quilt. He had fought sleep as long as he could, his little eyes darting around the room, but exhaustion had finally won. Looking at him sleeping there, so innocent and small, made my blood boil. He shouldn't have to be afraid in his grandmother's house. He shouldn't have to warn me that his own father was plotting against me. I had a heavy cast iron skillet sitting on the table next to me. It sounds foolish, I know. An old woman against the world with a frying pan. But I didn't have a gun, and I didn't have a bat. I just had the tools of my trade. And I've swung that skillet for 40 years. It had some weight to it. At 2:13 a.m., I saw the lights. They swept across the living room wall, bright and jarring, cutting through the darkness. A vehicle had turned into my driveway. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just watched through the sheer curtains. It wasn't Jeffrey's SUV. It was a white van. No windows in the back. On the side, in generic blue lettering, it said Valley Medical Transport. My heart hammered against my ribs, but my hands were steady. This was it. Jeffrey wasn't coming himself. He didn't have the stomach for it. He had sent hired hands, orderlies from some facility, likely paid under the table to come collect a difficult patient in the middle of the night. I watched two men get out. They were big, not just tall, but wide, the kind of men hired not for their medical expertise, but for their ability to lift dead weight. They were wearing scrubs that looked a size too small. They didn't walk to the door like guests. They walked with purpose, quiet, fast. They didn't look around. They assumed the house was asleep. They assumed the old woman inside was sedated, confused, and alone. I gripped the armrest of my chair. I glanced at the front door. Earlier that evening, after finding the papers, I had done two things. First, I had engaged the heavy deadbolt. Jeffrey had the key to the handle lock, but he didn't have the key to the deadbolt. We never used it. Second, I had taken one of my sturdy dining room chairs and wedged it firmly under the doorknob. I heard footsteps on the porch, soft rubber soles on wood. Then, the sound that will haunt me for the rest of my life, the metallic scratch click of a key sliding into the lock. It was my key, the one from the hook, the one my son stole. I heard the tumblers click. The handle turned. The door bumped hard against the deadbolt, and the chair. Thud. Silence. Then, a confused whisper from the other side. It's locked. Try it again. A second voice hissed. He gave us the key. He said he checked it this morning. The handle rattled again, more aggressive this time. Rattle thud. The door didn't budge. My husband had installed that deadbolt 20 years ago, and he installed things to last. I'm telling you, it's stuck, the first man said. Or it's bolted. He said she'd be out cold. The second voice argued, sounding irritated. He said she takes sleeping pills, and he'd make sure she took extra. He said the door would be unlocked, so we could just carry her out without a scene. Tears pricked my eyes, hot and angry. He said she'd be out cold. Jeffrey didn't just want me gone. He wanted me drugged. He wanted me to wake up strapped to a bed in a strange room with no memory of how I got there, so the doctors would think I was crazy when I claimed I was kidnapped. It was cruel. It was the kind of cruelty you don't expect from the boy you taught to ride a bike. What do we do? The first man asked. We can't kick it in. The neighbors will wake up. Call him, the second man said. That was my cue. I didn't scream. I didn't cower. I picked up my phone. I have one of those doorbell cameras. Jeffrey actually bought it for me last Christmas, the irony of which wasn't lost on me. I opened the app. I could see them clearly in the black and white night vision. Two strangers on my porch deciding my fate. I pressed the microphone button. I didn't turn on the porch light yet. I wanted them to hear me first. Gentlemen, I said, my voice came out of the little speaker on the doorbell, loud and crisp in the silent night. On the screen, I saw them both jump about a foot in the air. They spun around, looking for the source of the voice. I suggest you step away from my door. I said. My voice was calm. It was the voice I used when Jeffrey was a teenager and missed curfew. It was the voice of a mother who is done with nonsense. Who is that? One of them whispered, panic rising in his voice. I am Rose Gordon, I said. I am the woman who is supposed to be out cold. And I am the woman who currently has a direct line to the county sheriff. I stood up then and walked to the wall switch. I flipped the floodlights on. Blinding white light bathed the porch. The men threw their hands up to cover their eyes, caught like raccoons in a trash can. I went back to the microphone. I have your faces on camera. I have your license plate number. And I have the recording of you admitting my son gave you a stolen key. The bigger man looked at the camera, his face pale. Look, lady, we were just told there was a patient. I am not a patient. I snapped, letting a little bit of my fury bleed through. I am a homeowner, and you are breaking and entering. The police are already on their way. If you are still on my property in 30 seconds, you can explain to them why you're trying to kidnap a sane woman in her pajamas. It was a bluff. I hadn't called the police yet. I knew if the police came, they might call Jeffrey. Jeffrey would show up with his guardianship papers, play the concerned son, and tell the officers I was having an episode. He would say the men were medical professionals. It might get muddy. I couldn't risk it. I needed them gone, and I needed them to know they were the ones in danger. It worked. These weren't hardened criminals. They were orderlies looking for easy overtime cash. They knew that if the cops showed up, they'd lose their licenses. They'd go to jail. Let's go, the second man said, grabbing the first one's arm. Forget it. It's a setup. He lied to us. But the money, forget the money. She's awake. Let's go. They scrambled off the porch, tripping over each other in their haste. They jumped into the van, tires screeching as they reversed out of my driveway. They didn't even turn their headlights on until they were halfway down the block. I watched them go until the taillights disappeared. Only then did my knees give out. I sank back into the armchair, the adrenaline draining out of me, leaving me shaking. Grandma? I turned. Cody was sitting up, rubbing his eyes. What was that noise? Who was yelling? I took a deep breath and pushed the fear down deep into a box where I keep all my hard things. I couldn't let him see me shake. I had to be his rock. I walked over to the sofa and pulled him into a hug, squeezing him tight. He smelled like baby shampoo and innocence. It was nobody, baby, I whispered into his hair. Just some bad men who had the wrong house. I sent them away. Did Daddy send them? He asked quietly. My heart shattered all over again. I pulled back and looked at him. I couldn't lie to him. Not anymore. Yes, I said softly. I think he did. Cody looked down at his bear. Are they coming back? I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the empty street. The sun would be coming up in a few hours. Sunday morning, the day Jeffrey and Angie were supposed to come pick him up. The day they expected to walk in and find me gone. A cold resolve settled in my chest. It was harder than the cast iron skillet. No, sweetie, I said, they aren't coming back. I looked at my reflection in the dark glass. I didn't look like a victim. I looked like a woman who had just survived a siege. And when your father comes tomorrow, I said, more to myself than to Cody, he isn't going to find the confused old woman he's expecting. He's going to find his mother. I wasn't going to call the police. That was too easy. That was too kind. Jeffrey wanted to play games with legal papers and money? Fine. I knew that game. I was going to hit him where it hurt. I was going to wait for him to walk through that door with a smile on his face, and then I was going to take everything he ever loved away from him. Go back to sleep, Cody, I said, turning away from the window. Grandma has some planning to do. Sunday morning broke over Woodland Hills with a cruel sort of beauty. The sky was a perfect, cloudless blue, and the birds were singing as if the world hadn't almost ended on my front porch 5 hours ago. I stood in my kitchen, clutching a mug of black coffee, watching the light hit the granite countertops I had installed 10 years ago. I hadn't slept. Not really. I had dozed in the chair with one eye open, gripping that skillet until my knuckles ached. But now, strangely, I didn't feel tired. I felt sharp. I felt like a wire pulled tight. The phone rang at 7:05 a.m. It was too early for a casual Sunday chat. That was the first tell. Jeffrey isn't an early riser. He likes to sleep in until noon, letting Angie handle the mornings. If he was calling now, it was because he was panicked. He was sitting in that hotel room, staring at his phone, wondering why he hadn't received a confirmation text from the transport team saying the package had been delivered. I let it ring 3 times. Let him sweat. Let him wonder if I was gone. Then I put on my mask. I cleared my throat, forced a smile onto my face, even though no one could see it, and answered with a lilt in my voice. Good morning, Jeffrey. My goodness, you're up with the roosters today. There was a silence on the other end, a thick, confused silence. He had expected a stranger's voice, or maybe a nurse, or maybe just ringing that went on forever. Mom, his voice cracked. He sounded breathless. You're there? Well, of course I'm here. I chuckled, pouring more coffee I didn't need. Where else would I be? I live here. I just... He stammered. I was worried. You sounded tired last night. I wanted to make sure you were okay. That everything was quiet. Quiet as a mouse. I lied. I slept like a log. Best sleep I've had in years. I didn't hear a peep. I could practically hear the gears grinding in his head. He was trying to figure out what went wrong. Did the men not show up? Did they get the wrong house? He couldn't ask me directly without exposing himself. He was trapped in his own lie. Oh, he said, the disappointment dripping from his voice. That's great. I'm glad. Now, it was time to set the hook. I needed him here. I needed him sitting at my dining room table, feeling safe, so I could pull the rug out from under him properly. Actually, Jeffrey, I said, dropping my voice to a conspiratorial whisper. I'm glad you called. I've been doing a lot of thinking about what you said yesterday, about the house being too big for me, about safety. You have. His tone changed instantly. The fear vanished, replaced by greed. I could picture him sitting up straighter. Yes, I said, I think you're right. I'm getting older. Maybe I am a little confused sometimes. I think it's time for a change. I think that's really smart, Mom, he rushed to say. Really smart. Angie, and I just want what's best for you. I know you do, I said, gripping the phone so hard the plastic creaked. Listen, why don't you two come over for an early dinner when you pick up Cody? Say, for 1:00, I have a big announcement to make. I want to settle everything regarding the estate today. We'll be there, he said. He didn't even hesitate. He sounded like he had just won the lottery. We'll be there at 4 sharp. Do you want us to bring anything? Maybe some papers. Just bring yourselves, I said, sweet as pie. I'll handle the rest. I hung up the phone and stared at it. I bet you will, I whispered. The game was on. I didn't waste a second. First, I had to take care of Cody. I couldn't have him in the house for what was coming next. It was going to get ugly, and 6-year-olds shouldn't see their fathers destroyed, even if their fathers deserve it. I woke him up with pancakes, chocolate chip, his favorite. I kept things light. I told him I had a boring adult meeting later, and that he was going to go next door to Mrs. Higgins' house to play with her golden retriever. Mrs. Higgins is 80 years old, sharp as a tack, and the biggest gossip in Woodland Hills. I trusted her implicitly. When I dropped him off, I pulled her aside on the porch. "Martha," I said quietly, "Jeffrey is coming over at 4. Whatever you hear, whatever shouting comes from my house, do not send Cody back over until I call you. Do you understand?" She looked at my face, saw the steel in my eyes, and nodded slowly. "Is everything all right, Rose?" "It will be," I said. "I'm just taking out the trash." I walked back to my empty house. It was 10 a.m. I went to my bedroom and opened my closet. I pushed past the floral house dresses and the comfortable cardigans. Today wasn't a cardigan day. I pulled out my navy blue suit, the one I wore to my husband's funeral. It was tailored, severe, and commanded respect. I put on a crisp white blouse. I put on my pearl necklace. I applied my lipstick, a shade darker than usual. I looked in the mirror. The frightened widow from last night was gone. Staring back at me was the woman who had managed the family finances for 40 years, the woman who had survived loss and hardship. I had one more call to make, a call that costs $300 an hour and worth every penny. "Frank," I said when my attorney picked up. It was Sunday, and I knew he was probably on the golf course. "Rose, is everything okay? It's Sunday. Get off the green." "Frank," I said, "I need you to draft some documents, and I need them ready by 3 o'clock. Rose, I can't just. I need to update my will. I cut him off, and I need to create an irrevocable trust. And Frank, I need a restraining order drafted. I have video evidence of an attempted kidnapping." There was a long silence on the line. The birds chirped outside. "I'm heading to the office now," Frank said, his voice serious. "Tell me exactly what happened." I sat down at my vanity, the phone pressed to my ear, and began to speak. I laid it all out. The debt, the stolen key, the medical transport, van, the lies. As I spoke, I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. For years, I had worried about Jeffrey. I had worried I was too hard on him or too soft. I worried about his marriage. I worried about his future. But as I looked at the clock ticking toward 4 p.m., I realized I didn't have to worry anymore. Jeffrey had made his choice. He had chosen money over his mother. Now, I was going to choose myself. I hung up the phone and walked to the dining room. I set the table. I put out the good china. I folded the napkins perfectly. Everything had to look perfect. I wanted him to walk in here thinking he was the king of the castle. I wanted him to feel comfortable. I wanted him to smile that charming, lying smile of his one last time. Because once he signed the papers I was about to hand him, he wasn't going to be smiling for a very, very long time. Before I tell you about the dinner, before I tell you about the look on my son's face when the trap finally snapped shut, I need to tell you what I did that Sunday afternoon while the roast was in the oven. See, revenge isn't just about shouting or calling the police. Real justice is quiet. It's paperwork. It's signatures. It's making sure that when the dust settles, the people who tried to break you are left holding absolutely nothing. At 1 o'clock, while Cody was safe at the neighbor's house, I drove to the bank. Now, most banks are closed on Sundays, but the branch manager, Linda, has been a friend of mine for 20 years. We've played bridge together. She knows my accounts better than she knows her own husband. When I called her that morning, voice shaking just a little, and told her I needed to make emergency changes to my estate, she didn't ask questions. She just said, "I'll meet you at the back door, Rose." Walking into that empty bank felt like walking into a church. It was silent. My heels clicked on the marble floor. Linda was waiting for me at her desk, a stack of forms already prepared. She looked at me, concerned. Rose, are you sure about this? This is drastic. I sat down and took the pen she offered. It felt heavy in my hand, like a weapon. I've never been more sure of anything in my life, Linda. We started with the checking accounts, then the savings, then the investment portfolio my husband had built over 30 years. Line by line, we went through them. And line by line, I struck out the name Jeffrey Gordon. For years, his name had been there. Beneficiary, next of kin, the person who would inherit everything I had worked for. It was supposed to be his safety net. I wanted to leave him a legacy, but as I dragged the pen through his name, scratching it out in black ink, I didn't feel like I was taking away his inheritance. I felt like I was saving my own life. Who are we listing instead? Linda asked softly. Cody, I said, but not directly. He's too young. I want it all placed into an irrevocable trust. Education, housing, medical. He gets access when he's 25. Until then, it's managed by the bank. And Jeffrey? Linda asked, her pen hovering over the paper. Does he get a stipend? A percentage? I thought about the medical transport van. I thought about the stolen key. I thought about the dementia lies in that briefcase. No, I said, my voice hard. He gets nothing. Not a penny. If he challenges it, the trust will have a clause that uses the estate's funds to fight him in court until he's bankrupt. Linda nodded, typing furiously. The silence in the room was thick. It's a terrible thing for a mother to disinherit her child. It goes against nature. You spend your life trying to give them the world, and then one day you realize they're trying to steal it from under your feet. After the papers were signed, Linda walked me to the vault. This was the hardest part. She used her master key, and I used my key, and we slid out the long metal drawer of my safety deposit box. I carried it to the little private room and set it on the table. I lifted the lid. Inside were the papers for the house, our marriage license, and a small velvet box. I opened the box. The ring inside was stunning. It was my mother's engagement ring, a 2-carat European cut diamond set in platinum. It had survived the Great Depression. It had survived wars. It was the heart of our family's history. Jeffrey had been asking for this ring for years. He told me he wanted to keep it safe. He told me Angie would love to wear it for special occasions. But I knew the truth. Jeffrey didn't see the history. He saw the appraisal value. He saw quick cash to pay off a gambling debt. I picked up the ring. It felt cold against my skin. I remembered the day my mother gave it to me. She told me, Rose, this ring is for the woman who holds the family together. Jeffrey had planned to come into my house, drug me, ship me off to a state facility, and then come down here with my power of attorney and take this ring. He probably would have sold it to a pawn shop within an hour. I didn't put the ring back in the box. I slipped it onto my finger. It still fit perfectly. I closed the empty box and put it back in the metal drawer. Let him find the empty box. Let him realize he was too late. I thanked Linda and walked back out to my car. When I got into the driver's seat, I didn't start the engine right away. I just sat there in the parking lot, gripping the steering wheel. And then I broke down. I sobbed. I sobbed so hard my chest hurt. I wasn't crying because I was scared. I wasn't crying because of the money. I was crying for my son. I was grieving the little boy with the scraped knees who used to run to me for a hug. I was grieving the teenager who took me to his prom because his date got sick. I was grieving the man I thought he was. That man was dead. He had been killed by a disease called greed. The man coming to dinner tonight was a stranger wearing my son's face. It hurts to cut a child out of your life. It feels like cutting off your own arm. But I sat there, wiping my tears with a tissue, and I realized something important. If I didn't cut him off, He would drag me down with him. He would drain me dry and leave me to die in a place like Shady Pines, wondering where I went wrong. I looked at my face in the rearview mirror. My eyes were red, but my jaw was set. You are not a victim, Rose, I told myself aloud. You are a survivor. I put the car in gear. I had a roast to cook. I had a table to set. And I had a son to say goodbye to. The sadness was gone. It was replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. I touched the diamond ring on my finger. It sparkled in the afternoon sun, hard and unbreakable, just like me. I drove home. It was time for dinner. At 4 o'clock sharp, the doorbell rang. It wasn't a hesitant ring. It was a firm, confident press. It sounded like ownership. I took one last look at myself in the hallway mirror. My pearls were straight. My hair was perfectly coiffed. But more importantly, I adjusted my posture. I let my shoulders slump just a fraction of an inch. I let my eyes go a little soft, a little weary. If they wanted a tired, confused old woman who needed saving, I was going to give her to them. I opened the door. Jeffrey and Angie were standing there, backlit by the afternoon sun. They looked like the picture of a successful suburban couple. Jeffrey was wearing a polo shirt that showed off his watch, a watch I knew he bought on credit. Angie was in a sundress, holding a bottle of wine with a bright, cheerful label. "Hi, Mom," Jeffrey said, stepping inside before I even invited him. He leaned in and kissed my cheek. His lips were cold. "You look nice. Is that the blue suit?" "Oh, this old thing?" I patted my lapel, playing the part. I just wanted to dress up a little. It's not every day I have my family over for a big decision. Angie handed me the wine. "It's a Merlot, Rose. The clerk said it has notes of berries. We thought we could toast to, well, to new beginnings." I took the bottle. I recognized the label from the grocery store bargain bin. $4.99. That's what my dignity was worth to them. A $5 bottle of vinegar. "How thoughtful," I said, forcing a smile. "Why don't you go into the dining room? I have the roast ready to carve." "Where's Cody?" Jeffrey asked, glancing around the living room. I thought he'd be running around. "He's over at Martha's house," I said, waving my hand dismissively. I knew we had serious business to discuss, financial matters. I didn't want him getting bored or interrupting us. You know how children are. Jeffrey relaxed visibly. "Good thinking, Mom. Really good thinking." He exchanged a look with Angie. A quick, smug glance that said, "She's making this easy for us." We sat down at the dining table. I had set it with my mother's lace tablecloth and the silver candlesticks. I served the roast beef, pouring the gravy with a slightly trembling hand, a calculated touch. "Here you go," I said, serving Jeffrey a thick slice. "I hope it's not too dry. I feel like I'm losing my touch in the kitchen lately. I forget things. Timers, ingredients." Angie leaned forward, her eyes wide with faux sympathy. "That's normal, Rose. It's a lot of work for one person. Managing a house this size. Cooking, cleaning, it's too much." "It is," I sighed, sitting down and picking at my napkin. I was looking at the garden this morning, and all I felt was exhaustion. I used to love those roses. Now, they just look like chores. Jeffrey stopped eating. He put his fork down. He couldn't wait anymore. The smell of money was overpowering the smell of the beef. "That's exactly why we wanted to talk to you, Mom," he said, his voice dropping to that serious, I'm the man of the house tone. "We've been worried sick about you. You shouldn't be burdening yourself with all this. You've worked hard your whole life. You deserve to relax." "I do," I agreed softly. "I really do." "We found a place," Angie chimed in too eager. "It's beautiful, Rose. They have staff to cook for you, clean for you. You wouldn't have to lift a finger." She was talking about Shady Pines, the place with the urine smell and the despair. But I nodded along. That sounds expensive, I said. Jeffrey reached under his chair and pulled out a leather folder. Don't worry about the money, Mom. That's what we're here for. We've figured it all out. He opened the folder and slid a stack of papers across the lace tablecloth. They knocked over the salt shaker, spilling salt everywhere. He didn't even notice. Bad luck, they say. For him. What is this? I asked, putting on my reading glasses, though I knew exactly what it was. It's just standard paperwork, Jeffrey said, waving his hand as if it were a menu. It's a durable power of attorney. Basically, it just lets me and Angie handle the headache of selling the house and managing your accounts. We'll pay the bills, we'll deal with the realtors, we'll invest the money for your care. So I won't have to worry about anything? I asked, looking up at him over the rim of my glasses. Nothing at all, he said. He smiled, and it was the smile of a shark. You just sign, and we take the burden off your shoulders. We'll take care of you, Mom, just like you took care of me. I looked down at the paper. The bold letters at the top seemed to scream at me. Transfer of assets and authority. It was a death warrant for my independence. If I signed this, they could empty my accounts tomorrow. They could sell this house next week. They could dump me in a facility and never visit again. And the worst part, they looked so happy about it. They weren't sad that their mother was losing her mind. They were excited. They were practically vibrating with anticipation. Do you have a pen? I asked quietly. Right here, Angie said. She pulled a pen out of her purse so fast she almost dropped it. She uncapped it and handed it to me. I took the pen. It felt cool and smooth in my hand. The room went silent. The only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Tick, tock, tick, tock. Time running out. I lowered the pen to the paper. I hovered the tip right over the signature line. I could feel them leaning in. I could hear Jeffrey holding his breath. He was already spending the money in his head. He was buying a new car. He was paying off his bookie. He was erasing his failures with my life's work. I let the tip of the pen touch the paper. I made a tiny dot of ink. And then I stopped. I didn't lift the pen. I just held it there, staring at the line. Mom, Jeffrey whispered. Is something wrong? Just right there on the line. I started to chuckle. It started low in my throat, a rumble that I couldn't suppress. Then it moved to my chest. Mom, Jeffrey asked again, his voice tight with confusion. I lifted my head and looked at him. I let the mask drop. The tired, confused old woman vanished. The doting grandmother evaporated. I looked at him with the cold, hard stare of a woman who has seen the devil and spat in his eye. I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. It echoed off the dining room walls. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was the sound of a judge delivering a verdict. You really thought I was going to sign this, didn't you? I asked, my voice steady and strong. The color drained from Jeffrey's face so fast he looked like a ghost. What? I tossed the pen onto the table. It clattered against his wine glass. You thought I was stupid, I said, leaning back in my chair and crossing my arms. You thought you could just walk in here with a $5 bottle of wine and steal my life. Mom, I don't know what you're talking about. Jeffrey stammered, but his eyes were darting to the door. We're trying to help you. Help me. I laughed again, shaking my head. Like you tried to help me last night at 2 a.m. with that van? The silence that followed that sentence was deafening. Angie gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Jeffrey looked like he had been punched in the gut. I didn't. He started, but his voice failed him. Oh, save it, Jeffrey. I said, the show is over. I reached under the table and pulled out my own folder. It was thick. It was heavy. You brought your papers, I said, slamming my folder down on top of his, covering his power of attorney completely. Now let's look at mine. The sound of my folder hitting the table was like a gunshot. It vibrated through the wood, rattling the fine china and silencing the room completely. Jeffrey stared at the thick stack of documents I had just slammed down over his pathetic power of attorney papers. He looked up at me, his eyes wide, blinking rapidly. He tried to laugh, but it came out as a nervous, dry cough. "What is this, Mom?" he asked, reaching out a hand as if to touch the folder. "Don't touch it," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it had an edge that made him recoil instantly. "That folder contains the reality of your situation, Jeffrey, and it is very different from the fantasy you walked in here with." Angie was gripping her wine glass so hard I thought it might shatter. "Rose, you're acting very strange. Maybe we should call a doctor. This aggression, it's a symptom, of the dementia." I turned my gaze to her. "Stop it, Angie. The act is over. You can stop pretending you care about my health, and you can certainly stop pretending I have dementia." I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I unlocked it and opened the video file I had saved from the night before. I set the phone in the center of the table, volume up all the way. "You asked for a doctor," I said, looking at my son. "Let's listen to the doctors you sent to my house at 2 a.m. I pressed play. The recording was crystal clear. The silence of the dining room was filled with the sounds of the night before. Scratch, click. The sound of the key turning in the lock. Thud. The door hitting the chair. Then the voices. He said she'd be out cold. He said she takes sleeping pills, and he'd make sure she took extra. Jeffrey's face went from pale to a sickly shade of gray. He slumped back in his chair, as if the air had been punched out of him. Then my voice on the recording, strong and clear, "I have your faces on camera. If you are still on my property in 30 seconds, you can explain to the sheriff why you're breaking into a sane woman's home." Then the panic of the men. "It's a setup. He lied to us. Let's go." I let the recording play until the sound of the van tires screeching away faded into silence. Then I stopped it. I looked at my son. He was staring at the tablecloth, unable to meet my eyes. He looked small. He looked like a child who had been caught stealing from the cookie jar, only he hadn't stolen a cookie. He had tried to steal my life. "I found the briefcase, Jeffrey," I said softly. "I saw the debt collection notices. I saw the application for emergency guardianship. I know you owe over $200,000, and I know you plan to pay it by selling my house and locking me away in Shady Pines." Angie let out a sob. It was a sharp, ugly sound. "I told you," she shrieked, turning on Jeffrey. "I told you we shouldn't have left the briefcase. I told you she was too sharp for this." Jeffrey slammed his hand on the table. "Shut up, Angie." "No, you shut up," she yelled back. "You said it was a done deal. You said she was losing it. Now look what you've done. We're going to go to jail." "Enough," I commanded. The authority in my voice snapped their heads back to me. "Nobody is going to jail today," I said calmly. "Because I haven't called the police yet. I decided to handle this as a family matter." Jeffrey let out a breath, a long sigh of relief. He thought he was off the hook. He thought that because I was his mother, I was going to forgive him. He thought he could talk his way out of it, maybe apologize, maybe cry a little, and things would go back to normal. "Thank God, Mom," he said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Look, I can explain. We were desperate. The debt, it just got out of control. I didn't want to hurt you. I needed a way out. I know you did," I said, "and you tried to use me as your exit strategy. But that door is closed, Jeffrey." I opened my folder. I picked up the first document. "This," I said, sliding it across the table, "is a copy of the deed to this house." As of 3 hours ago, this house no longer belongs to me. Jeffrey's eyes bulged. What? You sold it? To who? I didn't sell it. I corrected him. I placed it into an irrevocable trust. Do you know what irrevocable means, Jeffrey? He shook his head, mute. It means it cannot be changed. I explained, leaning forward. The beneficiary of the trust is Cody. The house is his. It is managed by the bank until he turns 25. I retain the right to live here until my death. But I do not own it, which means you cannot sell it. Even if I wanted to help you, I couldn't. The house is gone. Jeffrey stared at the paper. His hands were shaking. But the equity, that's $1 million, Mom. You just locked it away. I protected it. I said, from you. I slid the second document across. This is my new last will and testament. I said, it replaces the one from 2010. In the old will, you were the sole beneficiary. You got the stocks, the savings, the insurance policies. I paused, letting the weight of the moment settle on him. In this new will, I continued, my voice steady, you have been explicitly disinherited. You receive 0% of the estate. Not $1, not a piece of furniture, not even this dining room table you're sitting at. Angie gasped, you can't do that. He's your only child. And he tried to have me committed. I shot back. Actions have consequences. Angie, you don't get to try to destroy someone and then expect them to pay your bills. I picked up the final document. This was the one that hurt the most to draft, but looking at them now, seeing the greed and selfishness written all over their faces, I knew it was necessary. And this, I said, placing the last paper on top of the pile, is a restraining order. Jeffrey looked up, tears finally spilling from his eyes. A restraining order? Mom, please. You don't mean that. I do, I said. It states that due to your attempt to forcefully remove me from my home using hired individuals and your fraudulent attempt to gain guardianship, I am in fear for my safety. It bans you from coming within 500 feet of this property. It bans you from contacting me. But what about Cody? He whispered. I have already petitioned for visitation rights. I said, and considering I have evidence of you discussing criminal acts in front of a 6-year-old, I don't think the courts will have a problem granting them to me. I will see my grandson, but I won't see you. Jeffrey stood up. His chair scraped loudly against the floor. He was red in the face now, the panic turning into anger. He was losing everything, and he knew it. You can't do this, he screamed, slamming his fist onto the table. The wine bottle wobbled. I am your son. You're my mother. Mothers are supposed to forgive. You're supposed to help me. He pointed a shaking finger at me. You're ruining me. If I don't pay these people, they'll kill me. You hear me? You're killing your own son. I sat there, completely unmoved. I looked at the man who had once been my baby boy. I remembered holding him when he had a fever. I remembered teaching him to tie his shoes. I remembered paying for his college, so he wouldn't have debt. I had spent my whole life helping him, and that was the problem. I had helped him so much he never learned how to stand on his own. I had created this monster by cushioning every fall. I stood up slowly. I am 5'4", but in that moment I felt 10 feet tall. I am doing this because I am your mother. I said. My voice was low, but it carried the weight of 40 years of parenting. Jeffrey stopped screaming. He looked at me, breathing hard. I failed you, Jeffrey, I said, looking him dead in the eye. I failed to teach you independence. I failed to teach you that you cannot take what isn't yours. I shielded you from the world, and you grew up thinking the world owed you something. I pointed to the door. Now, you will learn the hard way, I said. You are a grown man. Figure it out. But you will not do it on my dime, and you will not do it in my house. Mom. He whimpered. Get out. I said, "Get out of my house, Jeffrey, and take your wife and your cheap wine with you." For a second, I thought he might lunge at me. I gripped the edge of the table, ready to grab the skillet if I had to. Yes, I had hidden it under my chair, just in case. But he didn't. The fight went out of him. He looked at the papers, then at me, and he saw a wall he couldn't break down. He grabbed Angie's arm roughly. "Let's go," he muttered. "But the papers—" Angie stammered, looking at the unsigned power of attorney. "Leave them," he yelled. He stormed to the front door, Angie trailing behind him, sobbing into her hands. He yanked the door open and didn't look back. He didn't say goodbye. He just walked out into the sunlight he didn't deserve. The door slammed shut behind them. The house shook. And then silence. I stood there in the dining room, listening to the sound of their car engine revving and fading away down the street. I was alone. My knees finally gave out, and I sat back down in my chair. I looked at the table. The roast was cold. The salt was spilled. The papers were scattered. I put my hand over my face and took a deep, shuddering breath. It was done. The cord was cut. I had lost my son. But as I looked around at my dining room, at the sun streaming through the windows, at the home I had fought to keep, I knew I hadn't lost myself. And for the first time in 24 hours, the knot in my stomach was gone. 3 months have passed since that Sunday dinner. The seasons are changing now. The summer heat is breaking, and the air has that crisp, cool bite that tells you autumn is coming. It's pruning season in my garden. I spent this morning out in the yard with my shears, cutting back the dead branches from my rose bushes. You have to be ruthless when you garden. If you let the deadwood stay, it poisons the whole plant. You have to cut it off so the new growth can survive. It's hard work, and my hands are a little stiff, but I don't mind the ache. It reminds me that I'm still here. I'm still standing. The house is quiet these days, but it's a good kind of quiet. It's not the silence of loneliness. It's the silence of peace. For a long time, I didn't realize how much noise Jeffrey brought into my life. The chaos of his demands, the stress of his lies, the constant hum of my own worry. Now that noise is gone. I haven't seen Jeffrey or Angie since they walked out that door. The restraining order sits in a drawer in the hallway, but I haven't needed to use it. The last I heard from my attorney, the reality of their situation hit them hard. Without my house to sell, the creditors descended like vultures. I heard through the grapevine that they lost their cars. I heard they are filing for divorce. A part of me, the mother part, still aches for him. I suppose that ache never truly goes away. You never stop loving your child, even when they break your heart. But I don't reach for the phone anymore. I don't lay awake at night wondering if I should bail him out. I realized that saving him again would only be destroying myself. He is walking a path he chose, and I have to let him walk it alone. But my life isn't empty. Far from it. The screen door creaks open behind me, and I hear the sound of running feet. "Grandma, look." I turn around to see Cody bounding down the porch steps. He's holding up a drawing he made, a picture of a big house with a bright yellow sun and 2 stick figures holding hands. "That's beautiful, Bug," I say, wiping my hands on my apron. "Is that us?" "Yep," he says, beaming. "That's you and me guarding the castle. Cody is safe. That's the most important thing." The courts granted me extensive visitation rights while Jeffrey and Angie sort out their legal troubles. He spends every weekend here, and often a few days during the week. We have a routine now. We make pancakes. We work in the garden. I'm teaching him the value of hard work, of patience, of earning what you have. I set up the trust fund, just like I planned. He won't get the money until he's old enough to understand it, but he knows he has a future. He knows this house is his legacy, not a piggy bank to be smashed open. I walk over and sit on the porch swing, patting the spot next to me. Cody climbs up and leans his head on my shoulder. We swing back and forth, listening to the wind in the trees. I look down at my hand. The diamond ring, my mother's ring, catches the light of the setting sun. It looks beautiful. It looks heavy. It looks like it belongs right where it is. I used to think that getting older meant fading away. I thought it meant stepping back and letting the younger generation take the wheel. But I was wrong. Getting older means you've survived. It means you have wisdom that can't be bought and strength that can't be faked. Jeffrey saw gray hair and assumed I was weak. He saw a widow and assumed I was helpless. He didn't realize that the same woman who baked cookies also built the foundation this family stands on. I sip my tea and watch the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. I am 68 years old. I live alone, and I have never felt more powerful. To anyone listening who feels like they are being pushed aside or underestimated or taken for granted, don't you dare close your eyes. Don't you dare go to sleep just because someone told you to. We are the ones who keep the lights on. We are the ones who hold the keys. And we see everything. Never underestimate a woman who built the home you're standing in. We may be old, but we are not done. What city are you listening from? And what time is it there? Write it in the comments. And if you'd like to help me keep sharing these emotional, thrilling stories every day, even a small donation makes a big difference. It truly helps keep the channel alive. For more life stories like this, you can explore the other videos on my channel and subscribe. On the screen, you'll see 2 new stories I'm sure you'll enjoy. Click one and start listening right away. With love,